𝗏𝑚𝑜
Now, dear devotees, may my homage be to the Supreme Buddha, Dhamma, and Ārya Sangha. Now, I would like to respectfully invite 𝗵𝗂 said to conduct the program today. 𝗏𝗪
Okay, we shall first. Can you guys hear me?
𝗬𝐻
Okay, we will first take refuge and then take the precepts. So everyone say with me: Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅgham saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi saṅgham saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi saṅgham saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. To observe the 5 precepts, say after me: I observe the precept of
I observe the precept of
abstaining from killing beings.
abstaining from killing beings.
I observe the precept of
I observe the precept of
abstaining from stealing.
abstaining from stealing.
I observe the precept of
I observe the precept of
abstaining from sexual misconduct.
abstaining from sexual misconduct.
I observe the precept of
I observe the precept of
abstaining from telling lies.
abstaining from telling lies.
I observe the precept of
I observe the precept of
abstaining from taking
abstaining from taking
intoxicating drinks and drugs
intoxicating drinks and drugs
with the refuge of the noble triple gem.
with the refuge of the noble triple gem.
I follow these precepts
I follow these precepts
for happiness in this life,
for happiness in this life,
for rebirth in heaven,
for rebirth in heaven,
and to realize the 4 noble truths
and to realize the 4 noble truths
in this Gautama Buddha's dispensation.
in this Gautama Buddha's dispensation.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so last week we talked about, we had a general idea of dependent origination, and we talked about just the basics. We went through all the things in dependent origination, how it goes from ignorance all the way to suffering. You remember that? The people that were here. So today we're going to go into detail on starting from the beginning, on starting from suffering, and we'll try to cover as much as we can, but it's better to understand each of the topics than to move on through the list. So in this class, we're not going for speed, we're going for quality. So we're going to try to understand each topic. So 𝗪𝗪, can you share the screen? Can you guys see me?
Yeah, Ustad.
So last week we talked, and it should look something like this. We talked about suffering, we talked about birth, and then we had a list like this. You guys can see this, right? So it goes from suffering, and then we talked a little bit about each of these. So clinging leads to, because of clinging, because of craving there's clinging, because of feeling there's craving, and so forth. And we talked about all of these. Now today we're going to be talking about suffering. So when we say suffering, there's all kinds of suffering in our world. We say aging, sickness, death, losing people and things you like, having to deal with people that you dislike, having to deal with things you dislike. These are all suffering. So the Supreme Buddha questioned, when he was a Bodhisattva, before he became fully enlightened, he questioned himself as to what was the reason for this. What was the reason for all this suffering? And he saw beings being born again and again. He saw beings going from the human world back to the animal world. He saw beings going from the human world to the ghost world, to hell, and then some humans went to heaven. And he saw all these different variations. And he asked himself, what was the reason for this suffering? So we should have a very, very good understanding of what suffering is. Suffering is knowing that one day we're going to get sick. Suffering is aging. We all have to grow up. We have to all grow old. Our black hair turns white. We have to start dyeing it just to keep it looking the same. Our teeth fall out. Our teeth turn yellow. They break. We can't stand properly. We can't walk properly. We can't see properly. We can't hear properly. These faculties deteriorate. Our eyes, our ears, our nose, everything deteriorates. So this is all with aging. That's something, this is a suffering that all of us have to face. And then there's associating, there's losing people and things you like. So the Supreme Buddha taught, if someone has 70 things, 70 objects in his life that he likes, then he has 70 sufferings in his life. So let's say someone buys a brand new phone. What happens if it breaks the next day? Suffering arises. He feels sad. He feels upset. In the same way, let's say there's people in his life that he loves. His parents, his children, his friends. When suddenly they pass away, then again they find suffering. So losing things and losing people we like is a part of suffering. And then there's the suffering of dealing with things that we don't like. It might be a boss at work. It might be someone in your life that's bothersome, but you have to deal with them. It might be things that you don't like. For example, let's say you really don't like the heat. You have to deal with it. Maybe you can't afford AC. Maybe you can't afford a living condition. Some people can't afford those things. So they have to deal with things they dislike. They have to deal with walking to find water. They have to deal with begging for food. That's all suffering. That's all things that we dislike. Then there's wishing for things that we can't have. For example, maybe someone hears this and thinks, I wish I didn't grow old. I wish I didn't get sick. But no matter how much we wish it, no matter how much we ask for it, we can never get it by wishing. So the Supreme Buddha questioned himself, and with his own knowledge, he realized, what's the reason that beings go through this suffering? And the answer was not something that we can think of. What did the Buddha say? The Buddha said, the reason beings go through suffering is because they are born. So the reason for suffering for all of these things is that we're born. Now, if we weren't born, would we have any of these sufferings in our life? No. Would those people, those animals, all those beings in those various worlds, would they have suffering? So they only got that suffering in their life because they were born. So the Supreme Buddha showed us that beings are born in 4 ways. So there's 4 types of birth. Now the first is birth from the womb. So birth from the womb means humans are born from the womb. Then certain animals, deer, bears, wolves, dogs, these are all animals that are born from the womb. So any type of being born from the womb, that being as soon as is born, what does it get in its life? It is guaranteed to get aging, is guaranteed to get sickness, is guaranteed to get death. Any animal, any being born from a womb gets those things. Then the Supreme Buddha saw that some beings are born from an egg. So chickens, fish, even crocodiles, snakes, all these beings are born from an egg. So these beings also, as soon as they're born, as soon as they hatch, what happens? What do they get in their life? They get aging, sickness, and death. They get all of those sufferings. They have to live in fear. Wherever a being is born, they get all of those sufferings for them. All the things that we mentioned before. Then the Supreme Buddha saw there are some beings that are born in moist environments. So some animals are born in decaying flesh. Some animals are born in mud water. Some animals are born in sewage water. So all of these areas is a moist environment. And the Supreme Buddha saw these animals are born like that as well. And these animals also get what? They get aging, sickness, and death. Whatever suffering there is, they also get that. And then there's the final type of birth. And this is a very, very important type. Someone has to believe in this in order for them to fully believe in the reality of karma. And that's spontaneous birth. So spontaneous birth, or 𝗏𝗶𝗏𝗃, means that some beings are born spontaneously. That means they're beings born in hell. They don't have to stay 9 months in the womb. They're born spontaneously. Hell beings are born spontaneously. Because of their karma, those beings are brought to that world and they're born spontaneously. So they don't have to spend time in an egg or a womb or waiting to be born. And the Buddha even saw that some humans as well are born spontaneously. So unless someone comes to the belief in spontaneous birth, then they can't ever fully understand the results of karma. Why? Because the heavenly worlds, all the heavenly worlds is spontaneous birth. All the hell worlds is spontaneous birth. Some of the ghost worlds are spontaneous birth. So all of these, when someone believes in this, then they can come to the idea that there are heavenly beings, there are hell beings, and so forth. So these are the 4 types of birth. And that means there's these 4 types, and any being that exists falls into one of these 4. That means there's not a single being that has escaped suffering. Wherever they are born, no matter what do they get? They get aging, sickness, death, and all the suffering that we mentioned. So the Buddha saw that birth is the cause for all of this suffering. Then the Bodhisattva asked himself, what's the reason beings are born? And we talked about the formation of karma to bear fruit. Now we're going to explain this again. Now, this might seem like a lot of information, but the Buddha saw that there are 3 places where this karma can bear fruit. That means, let's say we collect some karma in our life. That karma can bear fruit in 3 worlds. The first is the sensuous world. That means kama loke. Now, the kama world splits into 2. It splits into bad destinations and then good destinations. So the sensuous world has split into two. So there we see 4 bad destinations. What are the 4 bad destinations? The animal world. So if someone has a karma to be born as an animal, he's born in the sensuous world in a bad destination. Does that make sense? So if someone has a karma to be born in hell, that's the reason they're born in hell, because there's a karma that can bear fruit in hell. So if someone's constantly killing, stealing, lying, he's creating karma that will bear fruit in hell. So he's born there. So the animal world, the ghost world, the titan world, and hell. If someone has a karma to bear fruit in those worlds, then they're born in a bad destination. And that falls under the sensuous world. Then there are some people who have merit. That means they have karma that bears fruit in a good destination. But that's also part of the sensuous world. So the human world is one of those worlds. The human world and all the deva worlds. There are 6 deva worlds, and all of them, if someone has a karma to bear fruit there, then they're born in those worlds. So if anyone is born in a sensuous world, we have to understand that there's a cause. The cause for their birth in that world is that they had a karma that would bear fruit in those worlds. So does that make sense? So it's only because they have a karma that will bear fruit in that world are they born there. Then the Supreme Buddha, that's the first type of bhava. I mean, that's the first place where karma can bear fruit. So the first place is the sensuous world. Then the Buddha saw there's another bhava, there's another place, another realm where this karma can bear fruit. And that's the form worlds. The form worlds are all the Brahma worlds. So if someone wants to go to a form world, they have to obtain dhyana. They have to at least have dhyana, the first dhyana, and not have it disappear near the end of their life. So if someone can maintain a dhyana, if someone can have that kind of samadhi throughout their life until the point of their death, then after they pass away, they can go to the form world, at least one of the Brahma worlds. So the first 3, it's said there's 15 Brahma worlds. The first 3 are for the first dhyana. The 3 above that are for the second dhyana. The 3 above that are for the third dhyana. The 2 above that are for the fourth dhyana. And the rest are for anagami. That means beings that have realized the anagami state. That means they're non-returners. That means they don't have a karma that will ever bear fruit in the sensuous world. Now this seems like a lot. If this doesn't make sense, I want you guys to tell me. If there's a part that seems confusing, tell me it doesn't make sense. That way I can explain it even further. Chaturma, did you understand what I just said? Did that make sense?
Also, Swaminatha, I need more.
Huh?
So, I prefer more explain. If someone can explain.
Okay, I'll explain it more. So, let's just take it simply. There are 3 types of bhava. How many types? How many types, Vishaka? There's 3 types.
3 types.
So, that means karma. Let's say we collect some kind of karma. Okay? That means there's 3 places that this karma can bear fruit. 3 places this karma can give us an existence. Does that make sense? So there's 3 places 3 realms where we can be born. If we have karma, there are only 3 places. One is the sensuous world. The second is the form worlds. The third is the formless worlds. Those are the only 3 realms that can give us, that has karma that bears fruit. That means those are the only 3 places that a being can be born. Now, when we say sensuous world, that means all the worlds from the heavenly world to hell. Those are all sensuous worlds. And you can split that into the 4 bad destinations and the good destinations. So Sugati and Dugati. Does that make sense? So one of the realms is the sensuous world. That sensuous realm is split into 2, meaning good destinations and bad destinations. So does that make sense? So someone can have a kamma that bears fruit as an animal. Someone can have a kamma that bears fruit as a heavenly being. So the reason they're born as a deva or a heavenly being is because they have a kamma. The reason they're born as a dog is because they have a kamma to be born as a dog. Does that make sense? So the reason we're born as humans right now, the reason you guys are here right now is why? Because in your past lives, we collected a kamma that bears fruit in the human world. That kamma gives vipaka in the human world. Make sense? Okay, so that's where, that's the first realm, the sensuous worlds. Then there's the form worlds, Rupaloka. That means all the Brahma worlds. So in order for someone in order to create a kamma to be born there, someone either has to have dhyanas, that means they have to have high levels of high meditative states. They need to obtain high levels of samadhi and obtain something called dhyana. Either the first, second, third, fourth dhyana, or they have to be anagami. So the higher Brahma worlds are for anagami disciples. That means they've understood the Dhamma, they've realized the Dhamma, and after one more life in the form world, they will become arahants. They will obtain nibbana. Does that make sense? So in order to go to the form worlds, someone needs a dhyana. Someone needs a dhyana or has to become anagami. Does that make sense? So that's the only way they can collect that kamma. If they don't have a dhyana, they don't have the kamma necessary to be born there. So the reason we weren't born in the Brahma world is because we didn't have the kamma necessary to be born there. Does that make sense? Then the Supreme Buddha saw that there's a third world, and that's the formless worlds. And this world is only for people who does special types of meditations. That means like for example, meditation on neither perception or non-perception. So that person focuses on meditating on that kind of thing. Okay, someone asked, okay, I'll explain this part and then answer the question. So that person meditates on those things. So when beings are born there, they're kind of like sleeping. They have long lifespans. And they're just sleeping there. It's like they don't know what's happening around them. They're just there, born, and then they age, die, and then pass away, and they fall back down. But they were only there because they collected a kamma by meditating on a specific thing. So does that make sense? So there's 3 places where a being can be born, and they have to have the necessary kamma to be born there. So the reason beings are born is because they have that kamma in the first place. Make sense? So if they didn't have any kamma, like an arahant doesn't have any kamma to bear fruit. An arahant has no kamma. If he has no kamma, then he can't be born. There's no kamma to bear fruit in the next life. So birth is gone. There's no birth taking place. This is only cause and effect. So always remember, our life is completely cause and effect. The reason we were born is because we had a bhava. We had kamma that bears fruit in the human world. Is that clear? Then someone asked, what does it mean by dhyana? Dhyana means this person meditates, he gets secluded from sensual pleasures, and then he starts meditating. And then he obtains samadhi, concentration. And then he makes that concentration even more powerful. And when he makes that concentration even more powerful, he comes to a point where he enters the first jhana in English and dhyana in Sinhala. So jhana or dhyana, whichever you prefer, he enters that meditative state. Now that meditative state has thought and examination. It has a huge happiness involved with it. That happiness is not like us being happy when we watch a show or something. It's something that fills the entire body. Imagine the happiest moment of your life and then try to imagine something more than that. That's like the first dhyana. It completely goes throughout your entire body. It goes to all the way to your fingertips and spreads through the entire body, so there's not a single inch of your body that's not feeling joy. Does that make sense? So it's like complete happiness, and then there's even a further meditative state. So when he abandons thought and examination, he comes to the second dhyana. That also has happiness, and so forth. So these are high meditative states. Someone can only achieve these by practicing meditation, by achieving concentration, and working very, very hard at this. Okay, so if someone can keep that meditative state, meaning that let's say there's a monk, he's meditating, and he obtains the first dhyana, he obtains that high meditative state. And then as he grows older, as he comes to the last, near the end of his life, let's say he can't meditate anymore. He ends up in the sick bed and he can't concentrate anymore. Then he lost that concentration. But if someone can keep his concentration, meaning he can go into a dhyana whenever he wants, then he has the necessary requirement to be born in a Brahma world. He has the necessary karma to be born there. So it's like, imagine you have money, okay? Let's say you have 100 rupees. In order to go to a good hotel, they say at the entrance you need 500. Can you ever go there? No, because you don't have enough money. In the same way, if someone doesn't have a dhyana, they can't go to the form worlds. In order to go to a form world, you need to have a dhyana. In order to do that, you need to practice meditation and concentration and so forth. That's the way you arrange the necessary karma. Okay, so Bhava is clear. Everyone understands Bhava? So the reason beings are born is because they collected a karma in their past lives to be born in any of the bhavas. And there's how many bhavas? How many bhavas? There's 3 bhavas. Make sense? Vishakha, you completely understand?
Sensei, I have one question.
Yes.
So regarding the 𝗪𝗵𝗶𝗺, is it a good a destination?
No, it's not. Do you remember when the Buddha first looks to see who he can teach the Dhamma? And then he sees the first 2 teachers, Alar, Kalam, and then he sees that he's going to be he's born in an 𝗪𝗵𝗺. He's just there. He can't hear the Dhamma, he can't understand anything. Even if the Buddha travels there and preaches the Dhamma, that being can't even hear it. He's just he's like in a coma. Imagine someone in a coma. No matter how much you talk to them, they can't hear anything. So going to 𝗪𝗵𝗺 is not like a goal. So we can't understand the Dhamma there. The only places we can understand the Dhamma is in the sensuous world, in the good destinations. That means from the human world to Deva worlds. And then in the Rupa Lokas. So our goal is to, after, let's say we don't realize the Dhamma in this life, we have to either go to a good destination from the sensuous worlds, human world or Deva world, or the form worlds. That means the Brahma worlds. So that's our goal. If we can't realize the Dhamma in this life. That's the only worlds where you can realize the Dhamma, where they talk about the Dhamma, and where they can practice the Dhamma. But the only world where you can practice being a monk is the human world. The only place where this training is there is in the human world. Nowhere else. And then, so everyone understand now? So the reason beings are born is because there is karma that bears fruit. That means the reason for this suffering is because we created a karma that bears fruit in one of these worlds. So in our past lives, we might have collected a karma that bears fruit in the animal world. After we pass away, we might be born as an animal. That karma might come as the moment of our death and make us be born as an animal. So that's the danger of this samsara. That's the danger of the cycle of birth and death, is that we might be born in a bad destination. And when we come in this journey, most of the time we were born in a bad destination. Understand? And then we're going to understand why we were born in a bad destination, because the Bodhisattva saw that the reason for Bhava, the reason we created a karma that bears fruit, is because of something called clinging. Okay, so everyone has this down. So the reason we created a karma to bear fruit is because of clinging. And the Buddha saw that there is 4 types of clinging. The first is clinging to sensual pleasures. So we're going to go through each of these. Now, when we say clinging, don't think of it as us clinging to something. Like, there's a me and I cling to this. There are people who cling to things. Why? Because there is no self here. We're not talking about a self. We're talking about cause and effect. Clinging also has a reason. So it's more like falling into a trap. So we didn't necessarily we didn't cling on to things. We fell into clinging. Does that make sense? We got trapped into this. In Sinhala we say grahane una. So here it's not like we're grabbing stuff and then we're clinging onto things. We're falling into this. And the first is clinging to sensual pleasures. Now, when the Buddha defines sensual pleasures as... so the Buddha says there are things in the world, there are things that people like to see. There are forms that people like to see. People like to see shows. People like to go to the park and look at things. People like to see animals. Then there are sounds we like to hear. We like to listen to music. We like to listen to a beautiful voice. Those are all sounds we like to hear. Maybe it's the sound of your child, sound of a loved one. Whatever it is, there are sounds we like to hear. Then there are smells we like to smell. There are tastes we like to taste. There are tangibles, there are things we like to touch that give us comfort. And there are things that we like to think about. But the Buddha taught that those aren't what sensual pleasure is. That's not what he means by sensual pleasure. Those are objects of sensual pleasure. Okay? What are they? So things we like to see, things we like to hear, things we like to smell, those are all what? Objects of sensual pleasure. That means there are things there that we like to see, watch, hear, smell, taste, and think about. But sensual pleasure, the Buddha defined as the craving, the tanha for those things. So, okay, Vishaka, do you have a favorite flower?
Rose.
Okay, Chaturma, do you have a favorite flower?
Jasmine.
Okay, so Vishaka's favorite flower is a rose. Chaturma's favorite flower is jasmine. Now, is it because jasmine is better than a rose that yours favorite flower is jasmine? Or is it that a rose is better than jasmine that your favorite flower is a rose? So it's not the object that's changing our perspective, it's our craving for it. So our craving for sensual pleasure is the sensual pleasure. So our craving for those objects is what the Buddha says is sensual pleasure. For example, someone likes short hair, someone likes long hair. Is it the hair that changed? No, it's the craving for that. Some people like red, some people like blue. The colors aren't what are beautiful. It's our perspective, it's how we crave for that color. Does that make sense? So the craving for sensual objects is sensual pleasure. That's a very, very important definition. Did you guys understand that? So this clinging to sensual pleasures means we're clinging to that craving for sensual objects. So some people have favorite songs, but everyone's favorite song isn't the same. What's the reason for that? Everyone has a different kind of craving for things. They have a different perspective. They have a different perception of things. Everyone has a different favorite food. Everyone has a different favorite smell. Maybe the perfume you like isn't what someone else likes. Maybe the food you like, someone else finds disgusting. Understand? So it's not the food's fault. It's not the perfume's fault. It's our craving for that thing. So that's what the Buddha meant by clinging to sensual pleasure. And now we fall into this. Did you think I'm going to make jasmine my favorite flower? Or I'm going to make rose my favorite flower? No, you saw it and you thought that flower looks better than the others. That became your favorite. Does that make sense? So we're falling into this. And the reason of our craving for sensual pleasures, our clinging for this, is the reason why there's wars in the world. Is the reason why people fight over things. Is the reason why people steal things. Why? Because isn't it just a craving? People want this land. People want this kind of people. But the people or the land isn't beautiful. It's our craving for it. Does that make sense? And then the Buddha taught that there is another type of clinging, and that's clinging to views. Now, clinging to views means there are two main principal views. And the first is that after you die, there's something called the self, and your self, this soul, lives on forever. It stays for eternity. That means after you die, you go to a good place or you go to a bad place, and it stays there in that good place or bad place forever. So that's one of the major views in the world. People think after they pass away, they'll either go to a heaven and stay there forever, or they'll go to hell and then stay there forever. So they think there's something called a soul, and they stay there for good, for eternity. Understand? That's one type of view. And the problem with these views is that someone can end up doing something very, very dangerous or violent because they have this view. Now imagine someone thinks, after I pass away, I'm going to stay in heaven forever. And then someone says, this is how you do that. Then that person doesn't have any fear to do that thing. Why? Because he knows, okay, if I do this, I'm going to stay in heaven forever. Does that make sense? And then there's another type of view. And that's the view of annihilationism. That means he thinks after we die, there's nothing else. We die, that's it. Our life is just a bunch of random chemicals that came together, and then boom, life existed, and then after death, there's nothing. That's also another extreme. And the Buddha saw that there's these two extreme views. And that person who thinks life after death, there's nothing, that person, there's nothing he can't do. Why? He says, our life after we die is over, so let's just enjoy it while we can. That person doesn't believe in karma. That person can go around killing all the beings in the world, and it doesn't matter to him. Why? Because after you die, there's nothing. So the Buddha saw that both of these views are very, very dangerous. Why? Because in either of them, a person might do things that create a very, very dangerous karma. This view itself creates a very, very dangerous karma that leads them to a bad destination. So because we cling to views as well, we create karma that will bear fruit in one of the worlds. So clinging to views also leads to that. Now in the Buddha's time, there were so many views. Some people said you can go around killing all the beings. There's no result of dana. There's no results of goods and of helping others. There's no one special like mother and father. There's no rebirth. There's nothing. Some people said, no, you just have to continue on being born, and then after 84,000 millions of lives, you just get purified. You escape from samsara. You escape from birth and death. Just like, let's say someone has a ball of string, and then they unravel it. Eventually it'll go unravel and then stop, right? In the same way, you just keep being born and born, and then eventually you'll stop being born. So all of these views are, the Buddha saw, create karma that will bear fruit in one of the worlds, and most of the time in a bad destination, because of that view, and because of the things he does based on that view. Understand? So most people, they don't mind engaging in war because of which view? No matter what they say with their mouth, their view is after death, it's okay, there's nothing. Why? If they really believe that after death they're going to have to suffer the consequences of their actions, then they would never kill. Understand? So it's not being able to come to that belief that is the reason why all these conflicts arise. And then the Buddha saw that there's another view, and this one is he clings to rituals and observances. And now this is something that exists a lot in Sri Lanka and in Eastern countries. For example, this person believes that if he doesn't do a certain ritual or observance, then his virtue or his sila or whatever it is gets unpurified. So for example, maybe there are some people who boil milk on the New Year's so that their New Year becomes, they have good luck for their New Year. You guys know that, right? They boil milk and then make it overflow, and they think that by boiling milk, their New Year will have good luck. So that's a ritual that also is a wrong view. So they do this ritual. There are some mothers I know who say, if a lizard, the gecko, what's it called, huna? If a huna makes a noise before you leave, then don't go outside. Why? You're gonna have bad luck. So in Sri Lanka, there are mothers who still say that if a lizard makes a noise before you leave, you're gonna have bad luck. So they say wait a bit and then go. Then there are some people who look at horoscopes. They look at horoscopes and try to find an answer to their problems through that. In the Buddhist times, there are people who bathed in special rivers. They thought this river is very, very special. By bathing in this river, you can get rid of your past karma. You can get rid of bad karma. Now, how can just then anyone can just do any bad thing and just bathe it away, right? And the Buddha saw all of these rituals and observances also created karma. So this is something that's very, very dangerous, and this is something we have to slowly, as we learn the Dhamma, we have to abandon and get rid of. We have to see that this is a ritual, an observance that's not suitable for us. So slowly detaching from these is how we can come to practicing the Dhamma. Why? Because as we continue practicing these, if someone does these, then they're creating karma. They're creating karma that will bear fruit in one of those bhavas, in one of the destinations, usually in a bad destination. Does that make sense? So there's rituals and observances, and we cling to these, we fall into these. And then finally, the Buddha saw that there are beings, they cling to a view of self. Now that means they think there's a self, they think there's a me, there's mine, and all of us, every single person here, every single person listening, most of them we all have this view, which is that there is something called a me, there is something called mine. That's why I say this is my child, this is my house, this is my car, this is where I work, this is my job. Those are all because we have an association with a concept. We have an idea that there's something called a me. This is my hair. Let's say someone hits us. Why'd you hit me? Why'd you yell at me? let's say there's a lightning strike or a lightning storm, doesn't our heartbeat race up? Let's say someone scares us, we get frightened. What's the reason for that? The reason is it's so attached that we think, I'm about to die. There's a me there. There's a concept of me there. There's a clinging to this body as a me. Arahants don't have that. When Arahants don't get afraid. That's why they're free from that. There is no concept of self there. So it's because of this concept of self that beings create karma that will bear fruit in one of these worlds. So now there are 4 types of, in the Dhamma we say, there are 4 classes of people who have realized the Dhamma. Have you guys heard of that before? There's 4 classes. The first is someone becomes Sotapanna. Sotapanna means they've entered. Sota means stream, and then Apanna means they've entered, like entered the stream. The stream here means the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the path to escape suffering. So they've entered the Noble Eightfold Path. As soon as they do that, they're clinging to the self, clinging to something, an idea of the self, doesn't 100% disappear, but it gets greatly reduced, like to the point where you can say it's not there, but there's still some residue left. Only an Arahant completely removes that. So the Sotapanna person or the stream enterer has removed clinging to views, and he's removed clinging to rituals and observances. This person will never boil milk on the New Year to get good luck. This person will never be afraid that a huna went choo-choo or like made a noise before he left. Why? Because he has a good understanding. He's understood the Dhamma to a point where he knows this is right, this is wrong. But he still has some clinging to sensual pleasures. So someone who is a Sotapanna will could still have a family life, could still wear jewelry and makeup, could still wear clothes that are nice. So the Buddha never said, he never laid down rules saying, you can't wear this type of clothes, you can't wear this type of makeup, you can't wear this type of perfume. Only on Poya days do you refrain from that as a lay person. So there are some grandmas who say, you have to wear white when you come to take Uposatha. You have to wear white when you take silk. And they think if they don't do that, their sila gets damaged. That's wrong. That's a wrong view. That's a wrong observance. Some people say you can't offer meat to the Buddha puja. You can't offer meat to the Buddha. That's also a wrong observance. They've misunderstood the Dhamma. So those are all things that completely disappear for someone who becomes Sotapanna, someone who becomes stream entered. And then, so that person, what gets removed? Those views get removed and his idea of self gets removed, right? So clinging to views and clinging to rituals and practices, observances gets removed. And then his clinging to self gets completely diminished to the point where it's just a little bit left. The analogy is, imagine there's a dirty cloth, okay? It's a very dirty cloth. And then someone washes it. Now it's clean. But now there's a smell of soap. Okay? Until the smell of soap goes away, then he still has a very small idea of self. And that soap smell stays until you're anagami. Like even at anagami, the soap smell is there. Only an arahant completely eradicates this idea of self. Make sense? So he has he removes that idea of self. So because he does that, he can't ever be born in a bad destination. He can't ever create a kamma that will bear fruit in the bad destinations. So someone who becomes Sotapanna, his bhava is limited. He can either go to the sensuous world, good destination, so that means human world or deva world, or he can go to a form world. Make sense? That's Sotapanna person. And then there's Sakadagami. The second stage of someone realizing the Dhamma is when they become Sakadagami. That means they become a once returner. Now, once returner means this person has also removed completely clinging to views, clinging to rituals and practices, and their view of self is very, very diminished to the point it's not there. And their desire for sensual, their clinging to sensual pleasure is also reduced. So because of that, that person will only ever come back once to the human or deva world. He will only come back once to the sensuous world. That's why we call them once returners. Does that make sense? And then after that, he's guaranteed to go to the form world, one of the Brahma worlds. So that's second stage of realizing the Dhamma. Then there's the third stage. The third stage is when they become anagami. That means non-returner. That means this person has completely eradicated desire for sensual pleasure. This person has eradicated clinging to views, clinging to rituals and practices, and he only has a very, very tiny amount of this idea of self. So this person can never ever be born in the sensuous world. He will definitely be born in the form world, in the Brahma world. That's why we call it non-returner. He'll never return to the sensuous world. He doesn't have the kamma for that. Make sense? Then there's the arahant. When someone becomes an arahant, he completely eradicates all of these views. Not a single, not even a little bit of residue is left. The soap smell is completely gone. Because of that, what happens? He's completely eradicated clinging. When he's eradicated clinging, then what can't occur? What can't occur, Vishaka?
The accumulation of karma and birth.
So the bhava can't occur. The karma to bear fruit can't occur. There's no clinging. Cause and effect. There's no clinging, so bhava can't occur. There's no karma to bear fruit. Because there's no bhava, what's not there? There's no birth. Because there's no birth, there's no suffering. An arahant has completed the Dhamma path. He can't ever be born again. He's achieved the goal of the Dhamma. He's achieved liberation. He's broken the cycle. Why? Because he's eradicated completely clinging. Does that make sense? So the reason why beings are born again and again, what's the reason? Because there's bhava first. There's karma to bear fruit. And the reason there's karma to bear fruit is because of clinging. Again, clinging is not us clinging to things. Like, there's no me, I'm clinging to this, he's clinging to that. It's we fall into it because of something called craving, which we'll learn next week. Craving leads to clinging. So there's a cause for clinging as well. So there's a cause for these views to arise. And that reason is craving, which we'll discuss more next week. So for now, you guys should reread these notes. Try to have a good grasp of these concepts. Now, is there any part where you guys didn't understand that I can explain? 𝗙𝗫, can you stop sharing screens? So you guys understood everything? Every part? Vishaka, you understood?
In essence, I think so.
What do you mean you think so? What part is confusing? You're gonna ask now.
I think I understood.
If anyone else has a question, like concerning what we just talked about, they can ask even in the chat or anywhere. Chatumar, you understood everything? You understand? Okay. What was the message? What was the question on the other chat, 𝗪𝗪? Do all humans go to the same heavenly place? No. And the chances, so the Buddha one day took some nail onto his fingertip, some dirt onto his fingertip, onto his nail, and said, monks, what's more, the amount of dirt on in this great earth, or the amount of dirt on my fingernail? And the monks replied, Supreme Buddha, the amount of dirt in this great earth is far greater. You can't even compare it. And the Buddha said, in the same way, monks, when a human passes away, the chances of them being born again as a human, the amount of humans being born again as a human, is just like the amount of dirt on my fingernail. The amount of humans that go into being born as animals, ghosts, and to hell is just like this great earth. So the chances of someone going to heaven is very, very low, unless they have, unless they practice the Buddha, unless they practice the Dhamma, unless they practice virtue, they practice meditation, and they become someone who collects lots of merit. So even when they collect lots of merit, let's say there's 2 humans that have collected lots of merit in their life, depending on how much they've collected, depending on how much they've practiced giving, how much they've practiced virtue, how much they've practiced developing their minds, based on that they go to different heavenly worlds. So if someone has given lots, practiced dana and virtue a lot, they go to a higher heavenly world. There are 6, and those heavenly worlds have different lifespans. The highest heavenly world has, in human years, a lifespan of 9.2 billion years. 9.2 billion with a B, billion years. And then the lowest heavenly world has 9.6 million years. 9.6 million. So it's 1,000 times greater lifespan, from the lowest to the highest. And in the same way, just like lifespan, their beauty is just there's a difference in their beauty, in their power, in their pleasure, like the happiness they experience. Those are all different. So for the concepts we discussed right now, everyone understood, right? So now we have to work on seeing this in our day-to-day life. 𝗪𝗪, could you share the screen again? And the way we do that is we have to get into a habit of practicing this when we see something. So that means, so I wanted to show you guys 3 news articles that I saw today, and this was just from today. I don't know when the dates are, but can you guys see this? So the first says that there was an airstrike. So you guys know there's a war going on with Israel and Palestine, right? So when we see this, what do most people do? Most people take sides. It's because of Israel, Palestine is suffering. It's because of Palestine, Israel is suffering. And then that's what they take as the reason for these humans suffering. This war is the reason they're suffering. But that's not what the Buddha taught. What's the reason that these humans are suffering? It's because they were born. That we have to change our perspective now. Now we're trying to see dependent origination in our life. It's because when we see this news article, what should we think? It's because these humans were born that they're suffering. Then the one underneath says there was a shooting in a university. 15 people died. That means 15 parents are crying right now. That means 15 siblings might be crying right now. Those 15 people's friends are sad right now. all those people's lives got affected. What's the reason that those humans are suffering? It's not because of the killer. It's not because a shooting occurred. What's the reason? It's because they were born. That's the reason. If they weren't born, they wouldn't have to experience any of this suffering. And then the last one shows that there was a storm. There was a storm and 9 people died. So that's a natural disaster. It's not because there was a storm those people died and passed away. What was the reason that they had death in their life? The reason death came into their life is because they were born. Whatever being arises, whatever arises is subject to death. If a being comes to birth, it will eventually die no matter what. So the reason these humans died, these humans face suffering, is because they were born. So now we see this. Now what's the reason they were born? Now we're asking ourselves a question. We see this news article and we think, wow, these humans suffered, these humans died because they were born. But what's the reason they were born? Because they had come to be born in the human world. They had come to be born here because they had a Bhava. Because of Bhava, they were born. And because of that, they had to go through this suffering. So now we're seeing the Dhamma in our life now. This could be anywhere. You could see a billboard. You could see whatever it is in your life. You could see a show and you're seeing suffering. You know that this person is suffering because they were born. And the reason they were born is because they had karma to bear fruit. They had karma that gave results in the human world. If you see a stray dog suffering from like some kind of disease, what should you think? This animal is suffering because it was born. This animal was born in the animal world as a dog because that animal had a karma to be born there. Understand? And what's the reason he had a karma to be born there? What's the reason these humans had to be born in the human world? It's because in the past they clung to a view. They clung to sensual pleasures. They clung to different kinds of views. They clung to rituals and practices. They clung to an idea of self. They thought this was me, this was mine, this was myself. Understand? And so far that's all the things we've gone into detail. But don't forget the rest. What's the reason they clung? What's the reason for clinging? Craving. Because of craving they clung to those things. And what's the reason for craving? Is because of feeling. What's the reason for feeling? Is because of contact. What's the reason for contact? Is because of the 6 sense bases, the 6 sense faculties. What's the reason for the 6 sense faculties? Name and form, nama rupa. What's the reason for name and form? Consciousness, viññāni. What's the reason for viññāni? Sanskara, formations. What's the reason for formations? Ignorance. It's because they didn't know the 4 Noble Truths that they had to go through all this. So until we realize the 4 Noble Truths, what's in front of us? In front of us is still the same suffering. We're not free from the 4 bad destinations. We haven't become Stotapan yet. So then we have to understand that this destination is there for us as well. So now you guys should practice this. Now I said last week you should practice once a day. Did you do that? You did that? Okay, very good. Okay, Vishaka, you weren't here last week, right? So this week, when you guys see the news, when you guys see a sign, when you guys see an animal, when you guys see someone suffering, when you guys see suffering in your own life, when you think, why am I dealing with my boss yelling at me? Why am I dealing with these bad coworkers? Why am I dealing with friends who betray me? Why am I dealing with any of this? What should you think? The only reason I'm having this suffering is because I was born. The reason I'm standing in this bus, the reason I'm walking, going to a job, the reason I'm doing all this work is because I was born. What's the reason I'm born? The reason I was born is because I had a karma to be born here. I had a karma to be born in the human world. Because of Bhava I was born. Did I have Bhava? Is because I clung, because of clinging. I clinged to what did I cling to? I clinged to views. I clinged to sensual pleasure. I clinged to rituals and observances. I clung to an idea of self. What's the reason I clung? Because of craving. So we haven't discussed the top parts yet. So for that, you can just say the parts without going into detail, because we haven't done that yet. So up till now, we've gone into detail up to clinging. So don't forget that. Try to memorize these things. That way, wherever you are, you can now reflect on dependent origination. Again, for the people that weren't here, our teacher says if someone can reflect on dependent origination once a day, like Lokasana says, if someone can recollect this once a day, they're someone special. And he said this to monks. He said this to the monks. If a monk can reflect this once a day, they're someone special. So imagine someone who's in the lay life. If you guys can reflect on this, you guys are on the path to getting rid of the idea of self. You're trying to see that there's a cause and effect. There's a cause and there's an effect for everything. There's a cause for birth. There's a cause for suffering, which is birth. There's a cause for birth, which is bhava. There's a cause for bhava, which is clinging. There's a cause for clinging, which is craving, and so forth. The more you see this, the more the idea of cause and effect comes into your life. Understand? So practice this once a day. It takes at least 3 minutes, only 3 minutes a day. And next week I'll ask you guys if you did that or not. So practice this for the week. Okay, Hansen, you can stop sharing screens. So we will end this session here, and then you guys will have a chance to ask any questions you have. So today we learned the Buddhist teachings, and we collected loss of merit. We reflected on dependent origination and collected an immense amount of merit. All the merit that we collected, we share with all the heavenly beings. May all the devas rejoice in this merit. May they also have the good fortune to escape from this long journey of samsara. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We share all the merit we collected with all of these lay devotees, his departed relatives. May all the departed relatives rejoice in this merit. May they have a good destiny. May they have a good life in the next world. May they also have the good fortune to escape from this long journey of samsara. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We share this merit with our teacher, 𝗵𝗺 𝗨, all the monks of Mahamevanav, all the monks training in the Buddha's dispensation. May all the monks also have the good fortune to realize the Four Noble Truths in this Gautam Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We share this merit with all of these lay devotees and their families. May all these lay devotees be happy, healthy, and well. May you all have the good fortune to realize the Four Noble Truths and escape from this long journey of samsara. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Everyone chant with me. Kayena vacha cittena pamadena maya katang acchayang kamame bhante bhuripanya tathagata. Kayena vacha cittena pamadena maya katang acchayang kamame dhamma sanditthika kalika. Kayena vacha cittena pamadena maya katang acchayang kamame sangha punyakhetang anuttara. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I will chant a blessing for you all. Abhivadana 𝗙liche niccang vāddāpaccāyino cattaro dhamma vaddanti āyuvanno sukham balang āyurārogya sampatti sagga sampatti mevaca ato nibbāna sampatti minate samijjatu. May you all be happy, healthy, and well. 𝗪ᵣ Saranai, Namo Buddhaya. Now, if anyone has any questions, they can ask. You guys have any questions? Vishaka, you have a question?
So that like a reason to be born in 𝗪𝗵𝗺𝗃 is because of after practicing meditations. So is it like meditations which are not in the Buddha's teachings? Or?
Their meditations, like this person, like, do you remember the Buddha's first teacher? He practiced meditation on, like, it was a meditative state where he was trying to not have any perception. He was trying to get rid of perception. So when he did that, he was born in a world where he didn't have any perception. So he's like in a coma. Does that make sense? And the beings born there have long lifespans, like eons. The highest, there's four worlds there in the formless worlds. There's 4 places. The highest one has 84,000 eons of lifespan. Eons. And then it starts off at, I think, 20,000. 20,000 eons, 40,000 eons, 60,000 eons, and 84,000 eons. So their lifespan is very, very long. They're just there in a kind of coma state. And then eventually, after their coma is over, they fall back down. It's not any closer to liberation. It's not any closer to realizing Nibbana. So, and the Buddha never said you should practice this meditation and go to that world. So they were trying to get rid of, they thought this was the way to liberation. They thought if I get rid of perception, like Handunaganima, if I get rid of that, then I'm escaped. All my karma will be over, and they thought that's the answer to suffering. But they were born in that world. Does that make sense? Right. Any other questions? Chaturma, any questions?
Very complicated thoughts. Like even I want to concentrate, they say to do a meditation or something, then not actually a meditation, but when I want to concentrate to one thought, I will get so many complications. So how can I solve that problem?
So you get so many calls, like people call you?
No, complicated thoughts.
Or complicated thoughts when you want to focus on one thing. So, do you remember, not last week, the time before that, we were talking about getting rid of distracting thoughts? We talked about 5 ways. So, with those 5 ways, try to develop breathing meditation. Because, so what does loving kindness meditation do? What does it try to get rid of? Huh? It tries to get rid of anger. And what does breathing meditation try to get rid of? No, not concentration. It tries to get rid of vitarka, like our mind spreading to all kinds of things. Like our minds, like going from thinking one thing to another, like jumping around. Breathing meditation focuses our mind. So try practicing breathing meditation and use those 5 ways that we learned while doing breathing meditation. Understand? Do you remember the 5 ways? What are the 5 ways? Vishaka should remember too.
One is to replace from a good thought.
Yeah, so replace a bad thought with a wholesome thought. Then?
Not to think about particular.
No, there's one before that. What is it, Vishaka?
Think about the results.
Yeah, think about the bad consequences. And then what's third?
to think about how it came to.
No. Third was, you said before. You forget about it.
Have to think about.
Yeah, you forget about it. Like, you ignore it. And then? Vishaka, what's the fourth one?
To try to stop the thought process.
Yes, you try to still the thought from arising. You see how did this thought arise, and then you try to look at the way it arose, and then when you do that, by seeing how a thought arises, you can get rid of that thought. And then the last way?
It's to keep your tongue against the roof of your mouth and get determination and try to.
Yeah, you clench your teeth, you clench your fists, and then with determination, with your mind, you get rid of that thought. You crush mind with mind. We talked about all those videos. You can watch them. The past ones we did, they're on YouTube. You can watch them now if you don't remember exactly what we talked about. So try practicing those 5 ways with breathing meditation. Well, with any meditation, but to get rid of unwanted thoughts, breathing meditation is very, very good for that. Okay? Is there any other questions?
Could 𝗪𝗏, it's a totally different topic, but could 𝗪𝗏 talk about gambling?
So the Buddha taught that gambling is not something the Buddha recommended to do for even the lottery, like taking lottery tickets. So gambling, because what happens when someone gambles, they end up wasting their wealth. They end up wasting money they could use on their children, they can use on their mother, use on your father, right? So the Buddha taught that gambling is something you should avoid. Even friends who gamble, you should avoid them. So I can't really say like there's one part where it says, let's say the Buddha says you shouldn't drink, right? Let's say I refrain from drinking, but then I serve alcohol at a party and I give all my friends alcohol. Is that right or wrong? It's wrong, right? I'm letting someone else drink. I'm making someone else drink. Let's say I don't kill animals, but then I say, yeah, you should go hunting. And that person, based on my recommendation, goes hunting. So he's killing based on what I said, right? He's killing based on what I did. So that karma comes to you. So you can take the answer for yourself. But when you help someone do those things, that karma comes to you. Understand? So if I recommended someone, that's why for one of the rules, it says if a monk kills a human, he's parajika, he's defeated. But in that precept, it says if someone entices someone to kill themselves, so I help them. I say I compliment death. I say there's no point living, there's no point doing this. Let's say someone says that, and he says what's the point of living, suffering in this world? You can just die and then be born again. If he compliments that and that person kills himself, he's still parajika. He gets defeated. If someone, let's say someone says, I'm really, really tired of living, and then someone comes and puts a knife there and then walks away, and he had the intention that he's going to use this knife and then kill himself, he's parajika. He's defeated. And he didn't kill him himself, but he had that idea, he had that intention. So the karma comes to that person. So again, you take it in your own way. You know the answer. Okay. Then I think we'll end the session there. So if anyone has any question, you can ask next time. 𝗏 𝗏 𝗏 𝗏 𝗏 𝗏 𝗏 𝗏